So today I'm going to do something a bit different. I'm going to get all audiophile on your ass. In fact, I'm not going to do that at all. So as the little disclaimer stated at the start of this video, I am not an audiophile record listener, music listener. I do have a good system, but I've never been an audiophile. I don't tend to buy lots of copies of the same record and do lots of compare and contrasts like Ron Beaudry here on the VC. Do check him out if you haven't already. Ron was sort of my entry into the VC, interestingly. Even though I've never been an audiophile, I found his videos very compelling, the way that he has of just very patiently comparing pressings and trying to find the best sounding copy of a record. I found that very interesting. I do appreciate a good sounding record though, obviously, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to start a series where I start talking about the best sounding used records in my collection. One of the things I've started doing is just making a note of when a particular record sounds really good. And there are some used records in my collection that sound tremendous. It's one of the perils of buying secondhand records that you never quite know what it's going to sound like. I'm sure you've all been in this position. You know, you can buy a secondhand record, it looks absolutely fine, you clean it up, there's no apparent marks on it or scuffs or anything, and yet it just doesn't sound good. There's sound breakup occasionally, distortion, bacon and eggs crackle, all kinds of things, you know, can go on like that. By the same token, you can often buy a secondhand record. You can take a punt on one because it doesn't look that great. It looks a little bit worn, a little bit scuffed, and it sounds fantastic. It's very strange. I suppose there is a science of it, but I don't know what that is. But so with this particular series, we're looking at used records. So here's the disclaimer. I'm not making a case for this, you know, like these are the pressings to go for. I've not done any comparisons, and with used records, there is this kind of random thing going on. So just because I recommend a particular pressing, just bear in mind it is a used record. So don't go sort of, you know, immediately hunting for that record. Having said that, I've got a couple of original pressings here. So in that sense, you know, there's always this kind of idea that if you can find an original pressing of something, a first pressing of something, it's going to sound good. So in the description down below anyway, you'll find some web links to Discogs where you can go and have a look at what these pressings actually are. Okay, so after that very long preamble, 3.5 minutes of me rambling on, let's make a start. So the record that finally made me make the video, because I have had this in mind for a long time, was this one, which I listened to yesterday being Sunday. Not quite sure why it popped into my mind to listen to it, other than that I hadn't listened to it for a long time. And also, I must confess, this is the David Bowie album from the 1970s that I have least bonded with over the years. I've mainly listened to it on CD, and I don't know what it is, it's just never particularly grabbed me. And I know people talk about it all the time as being one of Bowie's greatest albums, and it's just never quite worked for me. The songs are never quite stuck in my mind. So I thought, right, I will get my vinyl record out and I will give it a listen. Now this is an original British pressing and it sounds really, really good. I really enjoyed it. I had to clean up the cover, it was really dirty. I really don't think I'd spun this record, or at least not for a long time, and I don't remember where I bought it from. Now, it's on the orange RCA, 1976. Condition-wise, it's pretty damn good actually looking at it. There's a couple of sort of marks here and there. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see them. Just a couple of minor little marks. No sort of real wear or tear or damage. It does look good. There's a couple of things there I can see. I mean, I would buy that record now today. I've got more fussy over the years, but I would still buy that record. Yeah, so this is a first UK pressing, and I must admit I did really enjoy it. I've often found that to be the case. You know, when you listen to a record that you've maybe listened to on CD, you've streamed it, it doesn't particularly make a big impact, and then you sit down and make yourself listen to the vinyl copy. It's got a very lush production, and it's just got a very, I don't know, just a very deep, rich kind of sound, and everything was clearly defined. It was just beautiful sounding. Still don't particularly love the title track of this record, and I really don't like the version of Across the Universe for some reason. I think Bowie's vocals on that are just too histrionic somehow. It doesn't really lend itself to the song somehow. But a great sounding album, really, really good record. So that is a first edition UK press. So, you know, you can't be too surprised, can you? Bought that many years ago. Don't recall where. So I meant to say in my little preamble, you know, all the issues that can come up with a secondhand record. I mean, you get these really annoying records that kind of, they start sounding all right, perhaps the first track, or even perhaps halfway through the first side, it's still all plain sailing, and then all of a sudden the sound starts to deteriorate. You check your needle, but there's nothing wrong with it, and the sound just starts to degenerate, or just get a little bit scuzzy. Obviously clicks, ticks, pops, that kind of thing. You all know what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that any of these records are absolutely perfect. None of them are flawless. But I don't mind that. I don't mind a little bit of, you know, very, very minimal surface noise here and there. These are all really quiet records, though. That's one thing that I can say about them. They are pretty damn quiet. That's just so refreshing to hear a lovely bit of complete silence between two tracks, or at least near silence. So this is Black Sabbath, the debut album. Now, this is a 1976 reissue. And this is one that I spun a while ago, and I thought, right, if I ever do this series on great sounding used records, I will definitely have to feature this one. Now this one I bought from Heightside Records in Lancaster, and it is in beautiful shape. Not quite sure how I would grade it. I mean, it kind of looks like near mint. I really can't see anything wrong with it at all. It is in great shape. Somebody's obviously looked after it. But a 1976 issue, very quiet, great definition. What I love about this album is just the complexity of Tony Iommi's guitar tones. It's that wonderful way he had of coaxing or creating all these different tones within, you know, even within one chord sometimes. You've got these lovely overtones, the kind of ringing high stuff going on, you know, the high frequencies, but then also this kind of dark, low down, crunchy stuff as well. He was an absolute master at tone. And what's great about this particular edition, or this particular pressing, is that there's no distortion at all. As in, I mean, there's distortion, there's Tony Iommi's distortion, but there's no distortion on the record. Every layer of the sound is just perfectly rendered. The drums, absolutely clean as a bell. You don't get any of that thing on the cymbals where there's a slight sort of swishiness on the cymbals. It's just really crisp. There is, okay, so the bass at the start of the track, NIB, I've just put very, very precise, very, very just crisp, you know, crunchy, contained. And as I said, hardly any surface noise between the tracks. It's just a really, really great sounding record. I've never heard an original British pressing of it, but it would be interesting to compare, because this one just sounds fantastic. So there we go. That's the second one, Black Sabbath, 1976 reissue on the NEMS label. Yeah, so not completely perfect. I put there are some clicks during the track, The Warning. Only about maybe 3 or 4 little clicks. I can live with that. It's all about being able to live with something, isn't it? And I've got a lot more fussy over the years. If I've got a record that sounds crap now, I will probably get rid of it. And one of the reasons for doing this particular series of videos, I think, is just to try and start to filter out some records, you know, find the ones that do genuinely sound fantastic, and then maybe start to think about purging some of these really annoying ones that they just get on your nerves when you listen to them. So the next one, this is, I think this was an original pressing, something a bit different really. This is the Stranglers and Aural Sculpture, and again this is one that I spun a few weeks ago, and I started making a little list of records that sound fantastic, and this one certainly does. This was an Oxfam purchase. I found a couple of Stranglers records together in the racks there, maybe last year. Both very, very well looked after records. The cover is, it's kind of near mint really, just really, really beautiful. This one is it's sort of a later album, this, isn't it, 1984. This is when the Stranglers were getting a little bit more kind of streamlined and a bit less punky. There's a lovely kind of streamlined, glittery production, kind of lovely soft keyboards, and just, I don't know, it's just got a great production. It's produced by Laurie Latham, who was Paul Young's producer. It's got that kind of 80s pop sound, very elegant sounding, and the actual record itself, just really lovely, quiet sounding album, quiet sounding vinyl, you know. quickly show you the label. We've got that on that side, and we've got an ear on the other side. And this one again, it's fabulous. You know, it's kind of, I'd say, probably near mint. I suppose that is the secret, isn't it? Often I said at the start, that huge preamble about you can get some records that don't look great and they sound great, but actually all the ones I've shown so far absolutely look brilliant. I think there's one on the list. I think the fifth record I'm going to show maybe doesn't, but yeah, absolutely tremendous. What I've really noticed about this particular record was that the sibilants were really good. You know, one of those really annoying things where you get a record that's slightly worn, and every time the singer hits a S sound, an S sound, it sort of distorts a little bit, and you kind of, you know, you're constantly getting up and checking your needle all the time, knocking dust off it, and then you find that there's no dust on it. It's just the record is worn. None of that on this record. Really, really crisp sibilants, and just extremely enjoyable to listen to. Leaps out of the speakers and sounds tremendous. So yeah, there we go. Aural Sculpture. Who'd have thought it? A slightly latter day Stranglers album, but one of the best sounding records in my collection for sure. Right, so next one. Again, this is one that I spun a while ago, and again it had got onto the list of ones I was going to talk about. This is Santana and the debut album. Now this is one where I struggled to track down the exact version of it. The Dead Wax, I came really close, not quite close enough. There was one letter or one number out. I searched Discogs, I couldn't find the exact one, but it looks to be a very early British pressing. It might be an early 70s reissue, but I think probably this is going to be an original pressing, maybe even a first pressing. I think it was August 1969 it came out, and the version, my version, I found a version of it it looked damn close on Discogs, and that was an August 1969 issue. And again, this one actually again is in beautiful shape. It's just absolutely, glowing like a peach. I mean, I can't see anything wrong with that at all. This one I think was a Heightside Records find as well, from here in the market on Saturday in Lancaster. So, and this one is just, it sounds almost shockingly great. All those kind of Latin percussion instruments, they just blast out of the speakers. And a couple of times I kind of jumped while listening to it because I thought that somebody was standing in the door of the room shouting at me over the music. Perhaps my partner had come home from a walk or something, as she often does, and she stands in the doorway and shouts at me in order for me to turn the music down. I kind of jumped and looked up, but it was a voice on the left-hand channel. And it's just, I suppose they call it presence, don't they, or something like that? Just that big kind of like, I don't know, it just roars out of the speakers. There's no crap going on. There's no distortion, there's no murky rubbish going on. It's just pure sound, just pure brilliant sound, and what a great sounding record. And it's so kind of layered, so many things going on, all the guitars and the vocals, and you've got all this, like I said, this sort of Latin-y percussion stuff going on, everything very clearly defined. Again, should stress, I've not heard any other versions of it, so don't take this as me saying this is the version to get, but that did sound great. So yeah, there we go. Bit of Santana, the debut album. Now the final record I've got to show today, I suspect this is going to be the one that maybe doesn't look quite as good, but this record sounds, I can't even describe how great it sounds. This is Marvin Gaye and Tammi Terrell Greatest Hits. Now I was spinning this again recently because I chose a track from it for this series I'm doing at the moment, which is my top 50 US songs of all time. So I pulled it out to spin it, but I knew it was a good sounding record, but I'd forgotten how great actually it sounded. So I think this is an original British pressing on Tamla Motown. And if we have a quick look at it, I'll probably find again now it looks absolutely perfect. But yeah, it does look damn good actually. It does look pretty good. So I've completely contradicted myself about the thing about finding records that don't look great but sound good. I still stand by that. I know I've got some records in my collection which you look at them and you think, oh god, that's going to sound terrible, and they don't. They sound brilliant. But what really impressed me about this record was just that it is Tamla Motown. And, Tamla Motown records famously were used, they were taken to parties back in the day, back in the 60s, and most of them that you find in the wild are beaten to hell. I had a whole collection, or at least a fair few of those Motown Chartbusters records, but I ended up purging most of them because they just sounded rubbish. They were beaten up. And the problem with Motown music is that it's kind of... there's a lot going on, and of course they were produced in the 1960s before a lot of the technology that later came on the scene was available, all the multi-tracking and stuff. So they've got quite a compressed sound, and they had to kind of squash it all down. And you sometimes find on Motown records that when it gets to those kind of, I don't know, perhaps sort of, those kind of blaring harmonies that all of a sudden leap out of the speakers, usually with a Tamla Motown record, you get a bit of like happening when the vocals happen. Not on this record. You can hear absolutely every little bit of the backing vocals comes through without a single blemish. And all the tambourines are just the pristine, and the music just sounds tremendous. I mean, it sort of pins you back in your chair, just their vocal performances, Marvin and Tammi, just amazing. So I'm so pleased to have this record, because it could easily have been one that was just beaten to hell and sounding rubbish. So I count myself very lucky to have that, and that is definitely one of the jewels in my record collection. So hurrah for that. Marvin and Tammi, greatest hits. So that'll do for now. 5 records, and as I said, I'll come back and do some more instalments of this as and when I've made another list of records that sound tremendous. So I hope you found that vaguely enjoyable, interesting, useful, and thanks for watching. I'll be back soon.